Right. It's official. I think I hate these pastels. So we come from the first one this morning. We finished up this morning. You saw me filming it, and then to that one. But I still hate I think it's either the colours or they're just so flat. There's a kind of I don't know, a comic illustrative feel about it. No, I don't like them. And then there's the hassle of working with them, the pain in the whatnot. So I'm going to draw some of the charcoal again, same as this morning. So we're having this discussion about, and this has come up before as well, that people say you've got to understand something in order to draw it, to observe and and capture it. You've got to understand it. I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes people make. This needing to understand. How does that help? Knowing that this is a sphere, or how the eye socket works, or how does that help? I mean, I might be wrong. I'm just saying that from my point of view, if I can see, I can draw. I can draw what I see. I might be in the process of trying to figure out what things are and to try and understand it, but this need to understand before you can observe and respond, not sure. I think most people get that round the neck, and all of a sudden they spend more time trying to know, and it's a knowledge journey as opposed to a creative journey. So I don't know. I think it's common though. I'm probably in the minority when I say things like this. I don't think that the majority of people would agree with me. But for me, if anybody comes to me and asks them to help them draw, I immediately say, stop trying to figure out what it is and just draw it as you see it. Trying to figure out, think of it as in 3D and all that sort of stuff. Why it's not, you know what I mean? It's just, it triggers everything. When you start thinking like that, it sort of triggers everything. It sort of, if it's about the technicalities or something, you start thinking about the as I said, the knowledge side of the understanding thing, and then you think about the execution side of things. Because if you're in that mindset of knowing, then knowing how to use equipment, knowing how equipment works and all that kind of thing, it's the same. It's a detail and all the rest of it. It's all part of the same trajectory, really. I think that once you're in the learning mindset, doing this is a learning experience, basically, or it depends on your learning or your knowledge. But I 9 times out of 10, when people stop thinking about this nose or the eye or whatever it is, when they stop thinking and just see shapes and tone, everything changes. It's just, and because the thing is that once that changes, once you start to relate that shape to its close proximity shapes, or other shapes, when you start thinking about that as opposed to how that shape is made, when I just think about how it's related to other things, everything changes. I'm not tied to an need to understand. And then if you think about, it's well documented now, and I've said it 1,000 times about this famous Picasso saying about however long, 60 years, whatever, to I don't know if it's a paint like a child or make art like a child, but basically, you think about how pure a child's response is to something. They don't know. They don't know the structure of something. They don't. I mean, admittedly, it's not really about making accurate copies of the world. It's only when you get older and you think you need to make copies of the world that maybe you could justify getting to know how things at work. But even so, you don't have to. And then I said, if you can respond in the way a child does, with curiosity and be fearless, then that will account for, that'll outweigh any need for knowledge, or understanding, as you might refer to it. But I say it's something that comes up a lot, and I think it's one of those things. Somebody just said it now. I think it's one of those things that you either get it or you don't. I think it's, if you're coming from the school of, you need to know. So you need to know bone structure. You need to know, you need to know everything. The shapes and how they, how they affect under light. You need to know all that stuff. If you're coming from that point of, that sort of direction, then I can't. Convince you otherwise. It's a thing. People are firmly, like this guy said, how could you observe and not understand what you're looking at? Well, that's not, it's not really smart a question, but I look at the for years humans have looked at the moon, have looked at the stars and not really known what they are, but you can still look at them though. You can still observe them. People have painted skies, painted the moon, not really understood what the moon is. So it's not really a valid argument, but that is how people think. How can you look at something and not understand, or how can you draw something and not understand how it, what you're looking at, how it works? It's dead easy, mate. Dead easy. Probably the easiest thing in the world. But the thing about it is, you see how much easier, much charcoal is just different. Honestly, you saw me fighting with that earlier with that those pastels. Crikey, they are monsters. Honestly, I think it is. It's it is control. I suppose it is control, but the responsiveness of it. You see, with charcoal, particularly when you've got the balance right, that is charcoal and paper relationship, which is always what you're going to fight with. If you're going to start working in charcoal, don't just pick up a charcoal pencil or some willow charcoal or whatever, or the other one, what they call it, vine, and some paper that's recommended. But don't just do that. You're going to have to go through a number of options, buy a number of pads and types of charcoal, brands of charcoal, and you're going to have to find the best relationship for you. It doesn't always, not just I use a certain type doesn't mean to say it worked for you. So you've got to find that. But once you've found that relationship that works for you, it's a doddle. Everything will fall into place. And then you can worry about the observational side of it and the relationships and all the rest of it. But you're not going to be fighting with the medium to actually manifest your observations, because that's what it is. Once you've got the equipment that is there to help you as opposed to hinder you, it's just going to help you to manifest what you observe in the way that you respond to it. So that's the other thing as well. So if you think of it as I said this the other day, but when you do the lie detector thing, you see it on the telly, on the Mission Impossible or whatever, and you see the needle that it's sort of bouncing up and down every time they tell a lie. This is what the charcoal does. Every time you observe something, every time you register something that you're looking at, this charcoal should be making those tiny, tiny stylus type marks. When you're working with a big lump of something like that stuff, you're not thinking that. There's no direct response to the surface with that. You have to think about actually what kind of shape you're making, whether or not it's going to be dark enough, and if you've got nasty colours like that, where they're all a bit garish, a bit, I'm going to say primary, but you know what I mean? They're very flat and horrible. There's no subtlety in that stuff, and it ends up looking like some comic illustration, which is not what, and that floats my boat. And I'm not really, I don't start with any kind of outcome, but when I get outcomes that I find displeasing, it's a different matter. But yeah, going back to the observation thing, or the knowing what you're looking at thing, I think I've come across this quite a lot in the people that talk to me about this, and there's quite a few people that have really struggled with, that I've met, that have struggled with making anything of any kind of worth. I can't say great work. I'm thinking in terms of worth to them, because that's ultimately what matters. But because they're locked into this idea that it's knowledge based, then it's also, there's comparison involved in it, because you have to understand, and therefore you compare to the knowledge that you've got and that. So the comparison then is that, did I illustrate the thing based on what I know accurately enough? So that's the thing. So it's a wrist, and it's got all these bones in this, now, and the other. Have I accurately illustrated that? And that's an assessment they'll make of what they're doing, and ultimately it's almost like a rod for their own back. But if they hadn't got that requirement that it must be something that I know in order for me to draw it or to paint it, then there's no comparison at the end of it. It's just simply my response. And if my response is effective, i.e. that from my response I've captured what I see, then whether or not I understand what it is that I've captured is irrelevant. But that, as I say, that kind of thinking is not your normal kind of thinking. People don't buy into that. They need to know, which is the curse, I suppose, of doing this. This is why people struggle to do it, because they're, especially with faces, because they're going to be bone structure, anatomy, all that kind of thing, eye sockets, muscle structures, and all that sort of stuff. It's going to be really, really complicated. Because and then especially if you do the shape thing, because I've come across people now recently that there are shapes in the face, and these shapes have to be known shapes, triangles and cylinders and spheres. And then, of course, how does light hit a sphere? How does it make the sphere look round? All that sort of stuff. Complicated, really complicated. And I've said to you before, lazy and impatient. That's me. And if I have to go through all that nonsense in order to capture a face, I'm not going to do it. I can't be bothered. But if I can just sit here, look and observe and look at relationships and just respond to it, great. That's exactly what I want to do. I don't want the complications of having to understand. I just think it'll get in the way. But as I said, that's me. I don't know if that is the general consensus. I think more people than not will disagree with me. So, but that's fine. I've not. This is what it's meant to be like, isn't it? But as I said, it's working with charcoal is an absolute joy. It's just like, I did that one this morning. I don't know if you've seen the other one after the first attempt with the I've not finished it, but after the first attempt with the pastels, I did this one. So and it's just a different level. No struggle whatsoever with that. If you watch that one, no struggle. Not fighting it. I'm not trying to get it to do whatever. I've used the other thing as well. I've used these. These are good. These pastel pencils. They're great food. They won't fight you. There's no. And I suppose in a way it's because it's monochrome, but nevertheless, I think you could probably, oils would be a lot easier than working with oil pastels because of the control you're going to have over them. But as I said, it's just one of those things. I've done quite a few of the oil pastels recently, but it's a different brand. So these new ones that Jackson got for me are a completely different ballgame, really. I think the other ones, because of the luminosity of the other ones, and they're in terms of working with them, they were more this one. Let me show you. They were more responsive in that I wasn't constantly trying to amalgamate them. I'm not doing that with these, but the difference between the colours, it's just such, and I think it's just the palette that's in the box that makes them really flat. But it's like that, for instance, very few colours, limited colours, but that's in a different league. That's in a different league to those. And there's, I think there's probably 3 colours in that, but it's in a different league. And that is a lot like the wax crayons, the kids' wax crayons that I was painting with or drawing with. It's a lot like those. Obviously, they're thicker and there's more colour in them and all the rest of it. But that red one was very much like closer to a wax crayon. So I think I like, if I'm going to use the oil pastels, they'd have to be a little bit harder, not so soft. There are Snell or something. I can't remember what it's called now. There are some really soft ones. The kind of thing I think Basquiat used these really soft ones. I remember Jackson talking about these really soft ones that you can get. I'm not sure how I would carry on with those. I don't think it's going to be, because if you lean towards realism, you're going to have to have some control over the way they're applied and the way that they amalgamate. And I think if they were really soft, I might struggle with those, and it would be a proper fighting match to try and get them to work together. But as I say, charcoal is a different matter. I think probably, that thing about you return to your happy place. I think this is my happy place. Charcoal is my happy place. I think that's what it is. Rather than, because it just simply doesn't fire me, that's all. Anyway, so the understanding thing, personally, I think it's a bad thing, but I can understand why people would want to know, because it's how people are taught, I suppose, and it's kind of ingrained in their psyche. But I think that the release that they get from not having to know could be quite significant in terms of their what they create, how they respond. Because the other thing as well is that I think you probably observe more when you don't know, because you're trying to figure out what's going on. Whereas if you know, I already know it's this kind of shape. It's a bit like the eyes and nose thing. Oh, I know what a nose is. I'm going to draw a nose because I know the structure and I know how the bones fit together and all that. So I'm going to draw that. I'm not going to bother looking. I'm just going to draw what I know. So there you go. There's the, and everybody will tell you, draw what you see, don't they? But they don't say to you, draw what you see, and don't draw what you know. They don't say that, do they? But as I said, it's a common thing that people think like that and change this charcoal. You see, the thing about this is probably to do with the fact that it's monochrome, as I said before. But the thing about charcoal is that in this search for the tonal values, in order to find the structure of the shapes based on the tones, it doesn't have to be a complicated thing. It can actually be very simple applications of charcoal or tone. And they can get removed. They can become amalgamated. There's all kinds of things that I can do with charcoal, which I couldn't do with the pastels. There's no way that I could say, I'm just going to indicate the tone there so I can get a better idea of whether the shapes are in the right place. I can't do that. I can't do that because it's just going to be over, painting over it, sort of thing. And the thing with those pastels is when you're painting over them, the build-up of the pastel in the first one. If you look at the first one and these two, right? I showed you this on the previous thing. Look at the video. Look at the build-up of pastel, whatever. It's just oil. Look at it. It's like I put it on with a palette knife. So that's me trying to do this, find the shapes. So because the other thing about this as well is that, and why I suppose I struggle, is that I don't draw outlines in order to colour them in. For me, it's a one process. If I paint, I'll paint straight into the colours. I should put an outline around things and then colour it in like everybody else does, but I don't do that. I just, if I'm painting in oils, or if I'm painting in oil pastels or whatever, I go straight into it. And that's the problem. So had I planned this out, I could have coloured this in really good. you know, and got all the colours right and everything else, but I'm drawing, and that's the problem with it. So maybe that's what should happen. I should put an outline down and then colour it in. And so, you know, I because I paint straight away, and there's no outline on this. It was not drawn to start with. This is just painting is drawing, and it works. You know, it works. It works for me in oils, but because of the control I've got over the, you know, over the medium, and you know, with the tools I've got. Although I've got my, if you've seen me paint, I paint with great big fat things that nobody think was possible to paint with. But that's for me, that's fine, and it works like that. But when it comes to something that needs a bit more consideration, you know, that needs consideration, then I should probably do an outline first and then colour it in. But it's not how I do things, so I don't think that's ever going to happen. I'm just going to whine about the fact that the pastels are no good when there are other people that are quite capable of doing, you know, amazing things with pastels. I think if you look at, say, what's his name, Toulouse-Lautrec, I saw it. There's a kind of it's not a still life. I don't think it is anyway. Like in a room with a chair, one of his, and he's painted. You know, he's painted with it. He's not drawn an outline. He's actually drawn. He's gone straight into the. But there's a heck of a lot of work in it. You can tell there's loads of work in it. And he probably did fight with it the same as I do. But so it's possible. That's what I'm saying. It is possible to do it and to have some amazing results, which is what he did. But I tell you what I noticed about it, and that's the telling thing is the spotty kind of impressionistic thing. So whereas I do this to create the tonal values in the impressionistic sort of style, they have almost like a specular application of colors in order to create tonal values and whatever. And that I saw that in the Trek pastel. There's a lot of that in it. So he clearly got to a point where he'd worked over and over and over, and he couldn't get it to be the right value. So he was, and maybe they were really soft back then, I don't know. But if they were like this, he was putting spots on it to actually create the tonal value. So, yeah, I suppose if you work at it, you could probably make it do it. But I said to you earlier, lazy and impatient I am, and I'm not. I can't be bothered to spend time trying to learn to use the medium. As that my friend said the other day, when you buy new mediums, you're supposed to spend time to master them. I can't be bothered with that. I can't be bothered with trying to master a medium. If it doesn't work straight away, then I'm moving on. You know, I had this approach to programming. If we developed a system that took more than 15 seconds to understand how to do it, we'd failed. You know, it was there, and we were in competition with some companies that would produce handbooks on how to use their software, and we never did. We didn't think there was any need. If you couldn't fathom how to use our software within seconds, never mind minutes, then we'd failed. And I'm kind of like that with this. If I've got to figure it out how to use it because it's this, that, and the other, then I'll move on. I'm telling you now, stuff that really you would not want to listen to me, or you want any advice from me, because I'm contrary to everybody else, and it's difficult to comprehend. You know, for me to comprehend as much as other people. That I say things and I think, well, why? You know, why don't people understand this? You know what I mean? You know that thing about what I forget what that's called now. Is when I can't work out why people don't understand what I'm saying. You know, what's that? I think that's an illness. I think I've got something wrong with it. I can't. You know, why don't people understand? So, I think I must be what's the name? What's that common phrase that people use? I forget what it's called now. Anyway, I think it's my problem. Let's put it that way. That I'm not communicating well. That's what it is. I think one of the things that really triggers me, though, is when people sort of pontificate. I know I do it, and someone said that the other week about me. But there was this kid on on here, and he's talking like sciencey stuff, you know, psychological stuff. Yeah, clearly he has no idea what he's talking about, but he's talking in this sort of you ought to a white coat on kind of thing, you know, and that winds me up because people believe him. That kind of stuff gets in their brain, and that's what it is. It's like this you have to understand to be able to draw it thing. Somebody somewhere has said that, same as the guy that said to me the other week at the art group and said, you know how you divide then, and he started to tell me how to divide the head up because he'd seen it somewhere that somebody showed him, you know, the alignments, and like the guy the week that said, no, typically the eyes always line up like this, or the mouth always lines up. I've drawn 4,000 faces, and I can guarantee they never line up in the same way. And what does it matter if they don't line up? But that sort of thing just winds me up. I just think it just doesn't help anybody. And somebody said to me this morning, the reason why I don't get views on these because I'm not helping anybody. And I'm not trying to help people. I'm just trying to illuminate the possibilities. And if that helps them, then fine. But other than that, I'm just showing them what I do and rabbiting on a bit about why I do it the way I do it. And that's it. So this idea that YouTube has to be a place that is dedicated to helping people, you know, like a painkiller scenario, which we used to talk about in the design world, you know, which is a complete myth. But anyway, but as I said, I just say this is what's happened to me. This is the way. This is why I do what I do, and how I do what I do in a way, you know. But whether or not it works for you, or whether or not it's any good for you, is another matter. You can take what you like from it and apply it in whatever way you want. But the main thing I think is that I've found by doing this in a particular way, I found a shortcut, if you like, to producing things that I'm happy with, and it's that what I'm trying to pass on, this shortcut. So having gone the wrong way around in a previous life, you know, so that I think is the thing that I'm keen to share, if you want. Whether or not it works or whether it helps is another matter, because not everybody's going to absorb what I'm saying about having the right mindset and or appreciate that sort of thing, you know, and that mindset is everything and skills are nothing, you know. That's not something that everybody's going to relate to. But some will, and I know some have, but it's just as I said, it's what works for me, and that's about as telling, I suppose, as I can be. I can only say it worked for me. Whether or not it works for you depends on many things. If you're still locked into the idea that it has to be about skill, then what I'm telling you won't work. So, but as you can see, charcoal is an absolute beast. Honestly, it's like, if you can get to master this stuff, there are no end of possibilities. You know, I think that one of the things that would, as I said that this morning with this one, one of the things I would say is that using other mediums does have an impact on, you know, the way that you say approach charcoal or anything. You know, doing another medium like that, the doing that, drawing with a pencil, which is a consistent line, even though it's varying in density, which is its saving grace. Coming back to something that makes a variable line, makes a line that is both thick and thin and different weights. You suddenly realize the potential for this. It's not a and the lack of potential in something like this, because there's no between the lines, apart from when it breaks up, apart from when you put things on top, there is nothing other than one consistent line. You can lightly put it on, but really it's one solid line, and which gives it this. And then you have a limited palette, if you like. A palette, it's not, there's loads of in the box, but they are limited in that there's a range of pinks, and it's not progressive in a way. It's not progressive enough in a way. If you wanted to do a proper full-on photographic like portrait, you'd struggle. But like I say, with charcoal, you got this multitude of marking, like mark making possibilities, and also the tonal aspect to it as well, because the depth of tone that you get with charcoal is another amazing thing. You can't underestimate the range of tone, which is why you need to get paper and charcoal that works in harmony, because if you don't get the full extent of the tonal range. I was going to say something really important, then it's gone. Oh yeah. The other thing is that when you do get the charcoal, make sure the charcoal has a range of both the complete range of tones. You can do one piece will make a range of tones, and it will also make a mark with no effort. That's a big thing. So you can drift across a surface and it still leaves a layer of charcoal. You also need it to hold a point. So it's not like, and I don't know whether or not it's things like the compressed stuff, the what do they call that, nitrum stuff, or whether or not it's just a particular brand. I mean, I make my own charcoal, so I don't really know what brands would be better than others. But the requirements are that it must, as I said, make a full range of tones, and it must also make marks with no effort, and it must also retain a point. And what happens then, and people say this to me sometimes, they think this graphite that I'm using, because it does all those things, it's drifting across the surface there, and it's creating a tonal value there by just drifting across. It doesn't have to be me pressing on it, because that's another thing. This is an example of this as well. I have to press on this to make the marks. I can't just lightly drift across it. And where I could just lightly drift across that with a brush. I can't lightly drift across this. And then the lines themselves have a tonality, because that's another thing about that they don't sort of talk about that much, that lines contribute to the tonality of a drawing, which is I did the technical illustration thing, and thick and thin lines was a method that people use because it was always printed in black and white. These technical manuals are always printed in black and white. So we used thick and thin lines to give the impression of volume, for instance. So a circle that had a shadow behind it would be a thicker line at the top than it would be at the bottom. So it would actually give the impression of it having volume. And then obviously you'd put hatching on it to create the shadows. But the thick and thin line thing is something that I sort of have that, I've retained that, I suppose, over all these years, over these, how long ago is it? 40, 50, 53 years ago, right? So 53 years ago, I was, that's a proper lifetime, isn't it? I was at night classes doing technical illustration 53 years ago. Isn't that mad? It makes me feel a bit sad, actually. I remember I used to go on the bus. With and it was dark, and I had a parka. Back in the day, that's what people wore, a parka. And I remember having a bottle of Indian ink in my pocket, which burst on one journey, and I got ink all over it. My mother wouldn't get me another parka. I had to wear the same parka. But there was a guy that was in the same class with me, and he was a bit of a dapper sort of character, and he wore a fedora, and I was so mesmerized. I never met anybody like that went to art college and was so glamorous, so to speak. He was a bit of a David Bowie type of character, and a bit, earrings. He had an earring. Now that would be, back in the day, that was apart from sailors and gypsies had earrings, not normals like me. But he wore a fedora, as I say, and I was just mesmerized by this bloke. And he didn't go as far as I did, and he did He got off sooner than me. But when I went to art college to do design, he was on the last year of the course when I joined. But later years, I met him in the design field. When I became a designer, I met him. He became a client. He worked for one of the companies that I was a designer for. But yeah, as a young kid, I was very I was mesmerized by all these people and they could do the job. Back in the day, it was that when people had craft skills, it wasn't computer driven, so he could do the job. Although he wasn't that great because he didn't continue doing the job. I think he just went and worked as an in-house marketing guy. That's what he did. But yeah, as I said, all those years ago, I was on the bus. I went on the bus I can't remember what day. It was 2 nights a week I went. But anyway, so charcoal, understanding when you're drawing, and yeah, I can't. As I say, if you believe that you need to understand in order to draw, then in order to draw something, then I can't tell you any different. I just know that from my point of view, knowing what I'm drawing is irrelevant. But it's, as I said, it's many times there's more than one way to skin a cat, and if your thing is to understand, then so be it. I think the most important thing is that if you're new to this, is that find out for yourself. Don't just because I say you don't need to know, or that somebody says you do need to know or to understand, doesn't mean to say either of us are right. You've got to find your own way. It's a bit like the charcoal thing. You've got to find what charcoal works for you. You've got to find out if knowledge is going to make much difference to your ability to draw something. See, I think that we draw in order to figure out stuff, to understand things. When you look at something, you sort of you're analysing it, aren't you? So, in a way, understanding it would not help in that analysis. It would only hinder because you're making assumptions about things. And as I said, for me, it seems like a slower way. So I'm done. Probably going to tidy up a little bit. Yeah. You see, the thing about the charcoal as well, the other thing about charcoal, I mean, I'm probably going to just smudge things here and there and just blend a little bit, but it's possible to create the feeling of form quite easily with something like this, where there's no, I mean, I'm just lightly pressing on that. There's no real blending or anything, of tonal wise onto there, but it indicates a tonal value, that is then related to everything else and creates the form of things. Yeah, I think the other thing as well is that it's easy to get things in the right place when I'm not worried about having to press hard on things or having to mark things. In fact, when you see me do the pencil drawings or when I've drawn with the wax crayons, and they're great. They're absolutely, the kids' wax crayons things. These things, these are brilliant. I don't know, nothing in that one, but there's a pink one here, but I can't use that. But these are great, these things. I've got little ones as well. I saw them the other day in, where did I see them? Staples, I think. But these are great on smooth paper. Don't put them on rough paper because these really glide. And there's nothing in that's going to interfere with your mark making with one of these. They're absolutely brilliant. But I don't know where I've got any of those. I've got some laying around somewhere that I did. And I think I put them all away. But yeah, they're definitely worth using. I think that one of the things is that I'd say if you're learning to do this, find a medium that's not going to fight you. You have to find out how to use it and all that. Find a medium that's nice and easy to use. There's enough to worry about without having to worry about whether or not the medium is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Because half the time you wouldn't know. That's the thing. I mean, I didn't know when I was working in watercolor. I didn't know that it was the watercolor and it was the brushes and it was the paper that was fighting against me. I had to learn that. And once I learned it, everything sort of fell into place. But in the meantime, I was trying to paint like really great painters, and failing miserably, but not knowing that it was more to do with the equipment than it was to do with my skills. And my skills weren't developing because I was too busy fighting with the equipment. So, you know, it's there's many things that I think that you got to take into account. And but as I said, you got to find your own way. Really, I think that's take on board what everybody says, and then analyze it and see how it works for you. That's really what everybody should do, anyways. You know, sort of to and where critical thinking and all that. So I think that's the what I'd advise. Don't take on board just because I say it. Don't take on board just because somebody else says it. You've got to think about it, do it, and find your own conclusions. Right. I'll love you and leave you, and I'll catch you later. I'm probably going to do a few more of these today, I think, because I'm now happier with the charcoal, and it's pleasing to do it and very stimulating. So, in which case, I'll keep doing it.